Blind Guardian, Twilight Orchestra, Legacy of the Dark Lord is an album I was kind of scared to listen to when seeing it was released today at the time of me recording. And the reason I was scared was I didn't want to hate this album. When hearing Point of No Return, the first track that they released, and saw that this was going to be a side project. This ain't metal. There is no electric guitars, there is no fast drums, there's none of that. This isn't power metal. This is a orchestral album with Hansi singing in it. And if you're looking for Blind Guardian's more like traditional stuff, you ain't gonna get it. Just skip this album if that's what you wanted. Now, I will say this, they ain't giving themselves any favors when they were titling the releases on YouTube with, War Feeds War and Point of No Return. They were calling it Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra instead of giving it its full name of Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra Legacy of the Dark Lord. It would have been a longer title, but it would have added to less confusion. Now, if you're worried that they're going to be sticking with the direction that this album goes, then I will tell you that the Twilight Orchestra part just means that this is a side project. This isn't a mainline release, even though they're advertising it as a mainline release, so keep that in mind. And as a side release, I can tell that a lot went into this side album. You can tell that a lot of passion went in, and Hansi needed to pull off his vocals in this one. He needed to go all out, and I would say that he does that 99% of the time. I do have two major problems, one in one of the songs and a really tiny nitpick in Point of No Return. And there's a part in the Underworld where I found it hard to hear what he was saying, but apart from that, his vocals are varied, and if you wanted more Hans, you get more Hans. Legacy of the Dark Lord is an album that really made him go all out as he needed to. He couldn't rely on the other parts of the band. He couldn't rely on the guitars, he couldn't rely on the drums, he couldn't rely on the bass, he couldn't rely on the keyboards. It was all him. He was in the spotlight of this album because it was his passion project, and he pulls it off. Now, I should state that I don't think that Legacy of the Dark Lord is for everyone. I listened to the full version on Spotify. They had two. They had the one with the interludes and the one without. And if you do decide to listen to this album, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're like me and wanted the full experience, listen to the one with everything in it. If not, then listen to the one with that stuff cut. But I do feel that you would be taking away from the experience of this album, as it's focusing on Lord of the Rings and is heavily focused on story. And with the way that this album is laid out, it's exposition song, exposition song, exposition song until the end. It does that 24 times in total, so 12 intermediate tracks and 12 normal tracks, and then you get to the end and the album ends. And when it comes to the tracks of this album, I find it hard to talk about, as I'm not the best when it comes to instruments. I feel like I can barely pull something out when it comes to metal music, but for me, I was quite lost with this album. And I know this may seem as a cheap move to say, but this is an album that I would recommend listening to, as me telling you would be spoiling what this album does, because there is a ton of variation in here. You've got the more sinister side, as that takes part in some of the songs. Like there's a part in Point of No Return to the more whimsical side in The Great Ordeal. And this is also with Hans's vocals. Like he carries this album. He does tremendous work. He pulls his weight in this album. He is the best part of this album. If you're a fan of Hans' singing style, then you need to listen to this album because it's got exactly what you want. And to top it off, he pulled what I feel is the best experimental album to come out of a power metal band. His direction on this album, bringing back the voice actors from Nightfall and Middle Earth, an album that is over 20 years old, to revise their roles in the story and taking what Blind Guardian is known for, which is dark fantasy power metal, and flip it on its head where it's all orchestral. It was pulled off so well, and as I said, I was scared for this album. I was hoping for this album to be really good. Like the night before this album came out, and on the build to midnight when Spotify was going to release it, I was just like thinking in my head, please don't be bad, please don't be bad, please don't be bad. And by The Great Ordeal, I was crying of joy. I was so happy. And then I got to the end and I was smiling still. And this album is quite a long one. Like these songs are between like 5 and like 7 minutes long. So yeah, this album is quite a lengthy one in terms of what you're getting out of each song. So to conclude this, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Are you okay with something extremely experimental and just out there? Do you like Hans's vocal work? Do you like long songs? Are you okay with the album not being metal? If so, listen to this. If you were hoping for Blind Guardian to release a new album that was, along the lines of like A Twist in the Myth or At the Edge of Time, you're not going to get that here. And you will most likely be disappointed. But if you're okay with listening to something that's extremely different from a widely well known power metal band, then give this a listen. If not, give it a pass. But I'm in that field of I was intrigued when they released Point of No Return. Like I was in. So as you can probably guess, I love this album. And to score it, I'm gonna give it a 98 out of 100. Now, the reason I would give it that instead of a perfect score is, as I said, this is something you need to put the time to listen to. You need to set it aside and listen to. It's something you can't just put on or you can't just put it on shuffle. It's something I feel that you'd have to set the time away so you can listen from start to finish with no interruptions. And if you do that, you're going to have a good time listening to this album. And that's the reason I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10 because I feel that its replay value isn't there. I'm not gonna listen to this album for maybe a few days after hearing it because I don't want to over listen to it because it is something that is just different and out there and completely outside the realms of what Blind Guardian are known for. You know what? That's enough of me talking. I've ran out of things to say. Anyway, thank you for watching.